any on topic?
No.
Okay, so going a little off topic.
Oh no, they're going off topic. I'm so surprised.
Surprise, right? So what are your thoughts on President Trump agreeing to meet with North Korea?
Well, I think it's a surprise, and I certainly hope that the president is well aware of Kim Jong-un's lack of good faith efforts in the past in working with previous administrations. It wasn't too long ago that this same dictator decided that he was going to not pursue a nuclear program if we just gave American aid to North Korea. Well, he took the money, and we're still dealing with now nuclear tests. I hope the administration is well aware that there's not a good track record there, and I hope they understand that we've got to have proof of a nuclear program not being pursued before any American dollar goes back to North Korea.
So there's been a lot of discussion this week, maybe even before this week, about steel and aluminum tariffs. Do you know how that would affect this district?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we got to make sure that our trading partners are not unfairly punished. Some of the free trade agreements that we have in place are very beneficial to our agricultural sector. Those companies that are in agribusiness that make up many of the largest employers right here in central and southwestern Illinois. However, the southwestern part of my district, a steel plant run by U.S. Steel in Granite City had been shut down because we have countries like China that are dumping steel into this country. We wrote legislation in the past that would have shortened the adjudication process to enforce fair trade rather than just free trade. And this next step that the president is taking when it comes to steel, I believe has helped to lead U.S. Steel to announce that they're reopening that facility. So we have to address the areas where we have problems, and I'm hoping that as the president rolls out his plan, that it doesn't adversely impact the areas of free trade and global trade that are really benefiting central Illinois.
Now, along the tariff line, I mean, there's that letter that opposed the tariffs sent by the president. You know, several members of the Illinois delegation signed it, but you didn't. What was your reasoning for that?
Yeah, I don't sign every letter. There are a lot of letters that go around in Washington, D.C. that I don't sign. And frankly, because I have a concern about the unfair dumping of steel in this country. And if the president thought that he had to bring up something as serious as tariffs to address the issue, I'm hoping that he and his team have a plan of action to make sure we can hold those bad actors accountable who still have continued to dump cheap government subsidized steel into our country and costing jobs in my district and right outside my district at Granite City Steel, where 1,200 steel workers used to work at a plant that U.S. Steel was actually investing new money in to upgrade when they had to shut it down at the end of 2015. They're now opening that plant back up. 500 steel workers are immediately going back to work, and I want to see American steel production grow.
It's been a few weeks now, but what are you doing to help prevent more mass shootings like the one we saw in Parkland?
Okay. Well, it's a tragic situation what we saw in Parkland. As somebody who's experienced a mass shooting, my heart goes out to every one of those kids who now have to wake up to the same fears and same memories that I do every day. It's very frustrating to look back and see the complete failures at every level of law enforcement, be it federal, state, and local in this case. The FBI clearly missed an opportunity through a very informed tip line call, and I would urge any of your listeners and viewers and readers to go look at that transcript of the call and ask yourself, how did law enforcement not pursue that tip and close that case? Instead, we're here in Bloomington, where law enforcement has taken a proactive approach to deal with the opioid crisis. That's the difference between law enforcement here and there, and we've got to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure those mistakes aren't made in the future.
Yeah, how do you hold law enforcement accountable in a case like that?
Well, you actually have oversight responsibilities in Congress, and when the FBI makes a mistake, we've got to go in and figure out why it was made, and we've got to make sure that they're not allowed to do that again. And when you look ahead, I think we need to help our schools become better secure. It's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in today. There used to be a program in place called the Secure Our Schools program. It was run through the Department of Justice, but it was deauthorized and not funded before I got to Washington. I think somewhere around 2011 was when that happened. I've introduced language to have that program funded once again. My colleague, former sheriff out of Florida, John Rutherford, has decided to help get that program authorized again. This is a first step in doing what we can to protect anyone who goes into a school. And also, it's unfortunate, but I think that's the best first step we can take.
That's all for me.
As for the meeting, how did it come about? How did you get in contact with law enforcement, or did they reach out to you?
Yeah, Sergeant Kipchinsky and Councilman came to me and relayed the story that the sergeant was talking about, how somebody from outside this area came to Bloomington Normal to decide to pharmacy shop. And they told me the story, offered up the suggestion that why don't we ask for identification for people picking up dangerous opioid prescriptions, and even if it's not prescribed to them individually. We ought to be able to have a law. Law enforcement ought to know, pharmacists ought to know who they're delivering those prescriptions to, and frankly, I think it's a good deterrent to stop those who don't want to show their ID if they're a criminal. But it's also something that's imperative, and was something that was a great idea coming from local law enforcement, and we took their idea and turned it into a piece of legislation, and now we're going to use their remarks and their idea and try and get it passed into law.
Could this possibly affect the people who pick up their prescriptions for their husband or wife?
I don't think anybody who's picking up prescriptions for their husband or wife, as I have to do for my wife who's a cancer survivor, I have to pick up prescriptions for her on a regular basis. I'm not afraid to show my ID to our pharmacist. Only criminals are. And in this case, somebody who's doing that for their parents, for their spouses, for their kids, for themselves, or for anyone else, I don't think they're going to be afraid to show their ID either if they're doing it lawfully.
So this won't affect in any way people who are picking up prescriptions lawfully for other people?
Absolutely not. This will only follow the same procedures that somebody would have to follow if they're buying Sudafed for someone else. And we saw how well that worked, getting some of the methamphetamine precursors off the streets, even though there was a lot of rolling of eyes and wondering why somebody has to sign up to get Sudafed. Well, you know what? Methamphetamine production here in Illinois went down when those precursors became less available. Unfortunately, methamphetamine is making a return because it's being produced outside our country and coming in and still ravaging through our communities, and we have to do what we can to stop it still.
And this is obviously an ongoing problem, so why do you think this was the case that made a difference?
Well, this is just one idea. Solving the addiction problem and the opioid crisis in this country is not going to be done by somebody showing their ID at a pharmacy, but it's one less step it's one more step that we ought to take to make sure that in the case of the pharmacy shoppers that law enforcement brought to me, this is one more opportunity to keep 300 pills off the street and stop the next possible addict from becoming addicted to opioids, because tragically we've seen the results of that.
Do you know what the timeline looks like for this bill?
I wish I knew what the timeline for any bill in Washington looked like, but I'm hoping we can do this as soon as possible, and I would like to see the Senate move on good legislation like this and the 400 plus other bills that we've already sent to them, many of them in bipartisan fashion. I'd love to see them act on those too, but sometimes the Senate moves a lot slower than what I would like.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.